if you drew a compass arc around Rochester, well, first of all, you'd be out in the water for a big chunk of that
That's
mountain.
right. The north part you would be. You're right.
But even without regard to that, you're going to have several hundred square miles in there.
So I'm listening to my favorite radio talk show host. His name's Bruce Williams. Back in the 80s, he did shows predominantly on financial issues, ranging from mortgages to car loans to starting your own business. Bruce Williams used to always say that he was the world's #1 expert at his own opinion. And that's basically how to describe myself. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm just basically a garbage man with a calculator and some views and opinions about the garbage business. If you want some professional advice, get yourself a certified public accountant. But for those of you that want to stick around to watch the remainder of the video just to hear me talk about my silly opinions, let's get started. So last week we did a video on temporary roll-off pricing, and I promised I'd do one to show you how I price a permanent account. So the difference, or some of the issues on permanent accounts, is you're typically looking at a single location. Usually, sometimes you've got a couple locations that you'll put together in one bid, but a lot of times it's a single location. In sharp contrast to temporary pricing, where you're throwing a price out there for multiple locations or an entire area. Permanent account typically will have multiple halls. If it doesn't have multiple halls, we're not gonna figure a separate price out for that account. It's long lasting, a year, 2 years, 5 years. These things are not going to last for 2 pulls and then it's over. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it a permanent account. It's got a predictable service time. We know exactly where the location is at, and we know exactly how long it'll take to get that box to the landfill. It's got predictable tonnages per haul. We simply look in the container, figure out what we think's in there, and plus or minus 10%. As garbage men, we're supposed to get that one right. So before we get into a specific example, we need to talk about some terminology. The first one is our direct time. The direct time is the time it takes to grab that customer's box, take it to landfill and dump it, and get it back to the customer. It includes the on-site time at the customer's location, travel time to and from the landfill, and it also includes the time to dump the box from gate to gate at the disposal facility. Indirect time, that's also known as dead time. That's the time it takes to travel from the yard in the morning to our first account, including pre-trip time, whatever it takes for that truck to leave, post-trip time at the end of the day, fueling, break time, if any, breakdown time if the driver stays with the truck, and travel time back to the shop in the afternoon when the driver's done. So what about lunchtime? Lunchtime doesn't count for anything. Why? Because it has nothing to do with your payroll hours. So our direct time plus our indirect time should equal your total driver payroll hours in that system. So just to give you an example of an average day with direct time and indirect time. Guy leaves the shop in the morning at 7 o'clock. He works from noon, takes a lunchtime which does not count, and then he works from 12:30 to 3:30. A total of 8 payroll hours. 8 payroll hours, 480 minutes. During that time, the driver pulls 5 loads, and the direct time on those loads per his log are these numbers: 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 95 minutes, 65 minutes, and 95 minutes, for a total direct time of 400 minutes, or 83% of the time he's out there, he's servicing an account. Just happens to be 80 minutes average. So if we take our 480 minutes and we subtract the 400 minutes of direct time, we come up with 80 minutes of dead time or indirect time. And again, we've already defined what that is. 80 minutes is 17% of the total minutes, or 16 minutes on average. In other words, if we allocated 16 minutes to each one of these customers, in addition to the direct time, we would come up with a total of 480 minutes for the day. So some of you are probably asking yourself, why does this guy make everything so complicated? Well, I'll show you why. So this is the annual profit and loss statement that we looked at the other day in our first example for the temp pricing. So to give you an idea, the revenue was 450 and our profit was 126. Now, we had, if you remember correctly, $277,000 in here for the cost and the profit of truck running. If we didn't take into consideration the 17% of indirect time, that would have cost us $47,000 on the bottom line. It would have brought our 126 down to about $80,000. So that's why our indirect time is important. Okay, so let's get started with a particular account, ABC Lumber Incorporated. Suppose we get a call from a purchasing agent who says they want us to submit a competitive bid for their waste removal service. They have one 30 cubic yard container on site and they want to stick with the 30. It gets hauled 5 times a month. We look in that container a couple times and we determine that there's 3.5 tons of garbage in that container per haul. ABC Lumber, we calculate, is going to have a 40-minute round trip time. That's the travel time. We think we're going to spend 15 minutes on site each time we switch that box out. And we know from our historical data that on average it takes 35 minutes at our local landfill from gate to gate. So we priced those 3 factors in. It gives us 90 minutes of direct time that we have to charge that account for. Of course, in addition to the direct time, we're going to charge for indirect time. So what do we do in the garbage business? We sell truck time, we rent equipment, and we pass through disposal. So here's the truck time portion of the equation. We got our 90 minutes plus 16 minutes of dead time. You can look at dead time as a percentage of your direct time, or you can just look at it as a raw time, like 16 minutes or whatever your productivity shows you. This is the simplest way, so this is the way we're going to do it today. So we got our 90 minutes plus our 16 minutes. We divide by 60 minutes to get to hours. It gives us 1.76 hours total per haul for that account. We know our cost per hour is $102 from the example that we've previously went through in the previous video. Again, this is a theoretical number. It's not my number, and you need to work your own numbers if this is going to be meaningful. So we've decided that since this is a competitive situation, we're going to look at a 20% return on our assets to come up with the profit portion of the truck time. You remember, we have a truck and a spare. We had a new truck for $180,000 and a spare for $60,000 for a total of $240,000 in the system. Times 20%, let's give us $48,000 a year for a required return at a 20% return on gross assets. We divide that by 2,000 hours per year, which is what we had the other day, come out with $24. Total of $126 is what we need for revenue for our 20% return, times 1.76 hours. The truck portion of this, including profit, is $221.76. So equipment rental, this 30-yard box is going to cost $5,000. So our monthly depreciation is $34. That's 144 months for 12 years. Our insurance is going to be $2.50 a month. That's for general liability only. That's $30 a year per container for general liability insurance. Our maintenance at $70 a year is $5.83. As I said in a previous video, when we buy new equipment, our maintenance on that equipment is low. After about 10 or 12 years, it increases significantly. Our 20% return on gross asset requirement is $83. That's our $5,000 times 20% divided by 12 months. So what we need out of this account is $126 in monthly rental to get to our 20% return. If you recall, we did an example in our previous video where I said we needed $150 a month. The difference between that example and this example is that was at 30%, this is at 20%. Now, ideally, you would price your account haul plus a rent, but if a purchasing agent needs to have entirely prices per haul and won't allow you to have an additional rental, then you'll have to get this $126 a month by dividing it by the predicted 5 hauls. So that'd be $25. Our disposal cost per haul is going to be our 3.5 tons times 33 a ton. It's $115. So to summarize, our price per haul that we would give to that purchasing agent from ABC Lumber would be as follows. It'd be the $221 for the truck, $25 for rent, $115 for our disposal, for a total of $362 per haul. I think it's important when you put together a long-term bid for any project that you identify the potential risks. So in addition to every other thing that you would typically worry about with an account, there's 2 main risks here that I see. The first one is the tons. We've projected by looking in a container or 2 that we're going to have to get 3.5 tons worth of disposal to cover our costs and pass through the landfill fees. That's an estimate. The exact, it could vary. If it varies significantly, 4.5, 5 tons, you're going to lose a chunk of your profit. The other one, whenever you're dividing your required rent into a number of hauls, you have to worry that the hauls might not be there. So if you've divided your $120 some into 5 hauls, and it turns out you're only getting 2 hauls a month out of that account, you're going to fall short. You won't get the return that you anticipated getting. Okay, just a monthly recap on how that's going to affect our profit and loss statement. We got a total revenue of $1,810. That's our $362 per haul times 5 hauls. We have a disposal cost of $577. That's our $115 by 5 hauls. Truck running costs were $898. Container costs were $43, and our profit was $292. $292 a month for a profit on ABC Lumber gives us a 20% return on assets. If we look at the $292 divided into $1810, it's a 16% margin. In the garbage business, a 16% margin is poor. Now, we should be running margins in the high 20s and the low 30s in the trash business. If you're not running that kind of margins and running this kind of margins, you're probably a startup, or possibly your market's been beat to shit by your competitors, or maybe you've made a few mistakes. But we're going to use this as an example only. If I was running it for in reality, I would probably go back and get a 30% return, probably give me a margin around 26-27%, which would be acceptable. You're not going to put any kids through college at a 16% margin. Thanks for watching.